As he, Jesus that is, was speaking, the teachers of the religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act, somebody say in the act, of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. Teacher, shout teacher, everybody. Teacher. They said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. Now the law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? They were trying to trap him into saying something that they could use against him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, all right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? No, Lord, she said. And Jesus said, neither do I. Go, sin no more. Somebody shout, thank you, Jesus. Please be seated. As been mentioned, today we start this new series, and it is not simply a series for those who are single. It is a series for all of us, single, married, young, or old, because it has to do with how do we navigate the complexity of 21st century relationships. The fact of the matter is that the world in which we live and the landscape of relationships are changing at warp speed. And because they are changing so rapidly from online dating to legalized same-sex marriage, new cultural norms are now clashing with traditional cultural norms and causing a great deal of conflict and confusion and pain in our homes, among our family and friendship relationships, in churches and communities all over the country. And the truth be told, it's causing a lot of conflict, confusion, and pain within our own individual selves. Some of us are asking the question, exactly what's right? What's wrong? If you're a follower of Jesus, in today's world, you're really trying to figure out what does it mean to be a faithful follower of Jesus in light of all of these rapid transitions. Is there a word from heaven? And yes, there is a word from the Lord in Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 8. It's a wonderful word where it declares, don't be afraid or discouraged. And then it makes three promises. For the Lord will personally go ahead of you. He will be with you. He will neither fail you or abandon you. Isn't that a good word? That's just a good word. And one of the ways in which God goes ahead of us and remains with us is through the Bible that we call the Word, that is the Word of God. The Bible is the framework through which we navigate all of the changing cultural norms across time. As a matter of fact, it actually helps us to navigate these changing norms in every culture and in every age. That's the importance of the Bible, at least for believers. So, today I want to do two things. One, I want to expand our notion of dating. Everybody say dating. You know, when you say dating, you think about a young couple getting together, Google-eyed for one another, can't eat, can't sleep, listening to Luther or Faith Hill on the radio, right? That's what we think. But if we step into the heart of the word dating and pull out the essence of the meaning, what it actually means, I think my definition is for me to become known to another person and for me to come to know another person. One of our team members gave me this acronym because actually dating is really about, or should be about, stepping towards intimacy. And the notion that she gave me to help to remember this is that intimacy is better defined as into me you see. Into me you see. Come on, say that with me. Say, into me you see. What a wonderful definition of intimacy. It's about disclosing myself so that you can know who I am and vice versa. And we make judgments based on that. Now, the fact of the matter is, if you've been married to somebody for 10, 15, 20 years, the person that you are married to now is not the person you married. All right? Because life has a way of changing us. And so you need to constantly engage and encounter or date them, if you will, in order to into me you see. If you have children and you're raising children, well, you know that the sweet somethings they were at 7 and 8 years old are not who they are at 16. And here's the good news, it's not who they're going to be at 32. Thank you, Jesus. And so in this we have to keep engaging. We have to keep encountering our young people. If you've got a good friend who's lived through tragedy in his life or her life, a huge sickness or death, then I can assure you that probably that good friend has changed, because death and tragedy has a way of changing us. So it's into me you see. We have to keep dating, if you will, engaging. And a part of this task is to figure out how to accept people as we grow and change. Now, let me give you my definition for acceptance. My definition of acceptance is to embrace and to engage in relationship with others without the precondition that they have to fix everything wrong with their life in order for you to love them. But it also entails that my accepting you doesn't mean that I have to always agree with you or endorse everything you do. And again, anybody who has children know the truth of that. So today I want to do something. I want to take same-sex relationships, same-sex marriage, and I want to talk about it. And I really want to use it to do three things. One, I want to be absolutely clear, because you deserve to know where your pastor and the leadership of this church is on this extraordinarily important issue in today's world. So I want to be absolutely clear what our convictions are and why. That's important. You ought to know. Secondly, I want to take a step forward. As I do that, I want to do it taking a step forward to help towards helping us become, in a more deeply way, the diverse community that we so cherish. Now, let me just say this. A lot of us, we like coming here because we look around, we say, man, we're people of different races, different classes, different political persuasions. You say, man, this is awesome. Well, that's one level of diversity. But the fact of the matter is, beneath this picture of all of us sitting here fanning, is another level of diversity, which means there's a whole lot of issues we disagree on. And part of what I believe we're trying to shape here as a community is to shape a community where we can kind of move from what I call one level of somewhat superficial relationships in this community, right? Because it's all right to sit on the same row with Democrats and Republicans and black and white, as long as we don't have to talk about those issues. So it looks like we're in relationship with one another, but in reality, we're just sitting on the same pew. We really know when we're in relationship with one another is when we can go a little deeper and when we can talk about issues like same-sex marriage and abortion and race and class and immigration and actually, come on, talk about it from our different point of views. You know, take that word viewpoint, point of view, viewpoint. I have this view, you have this view. And actually be honest about where we are, why we are, and then disagree, but hold together relationally in the disagreement. Now you got diversity. So I want us to take a step forward in deepening our diversity, because the fact of the matter is, whatever position I would take on this issue, there's going to be somebody that disagree. Whole lot of y'all. Right? So, can we disagree? And yet, here's my point. If you know that you're lost without Jesus, and if I know I'm lost without Jesus, we can work out all this other stuff. All right. So, the third thing I want to do, so I want to make it clear where we are and why. I want us to move forward towards a space for disagreement in the diversity of this community. The third thing I want to do is give you a practical tool. I call it the process of encounter, which comes out of my understanding of dating, the heart of it, right? A practical tool that allows you to have this kind of tough conversation, not just in the church, but with your friends and your family, because the fact of the matter is, because same-sex marriage is legal, it's going to be extremely prominent, and you may not want to talk about it, but we're all going to have to engage it one reason or another. And you just want to know how to talk about it. And if you can talk about this subject, then you can talk about all the other subjects that I named around race and class and abortion, immigration, etc., particularly as followers of Jesus Christ. So that's what I want to do. Let's go. Now, I want to do it by jumping into this text. All right, so here's where we are in this text. First of all, the important thing to note in this text is that it happens in a climate of debate. It really starts in chapter 6. After Jesus feeds the 5,000, a few loaves of bread and a few fishes, you know, the folk, he goes on the other side of the lake, some folk follow him, and he starts challenging the crowd. He essentially says, you know what? A lot of y'all, you want a relationship with me for the miracles that you're going to get out of my life. But the closer you get to me, the more the reality, suffering that comes with this relationship is going to set in. Now, here's how he talked about it. The closer you get to me, the more you're going to have to deal with this reality of eating my flesh and drinking my blood. And they went like, what did he say? Now, he was ultimately talking about communion, and he was ultimately, we're talking about his body being broken and his blood being shed. And what he was saying is that when you enter into the deepest points of relationship with me, you enter into a space where you're willing to suffer with me and not just take my miracles and go their home. So he has this debate with the big crowd, right? But then by the time we get to chapter 7, he's having a debate also with the religious leaders and the Pharisees. And they're saying, Jesus, you know, you're talking about, you know, you're the Son of God and you're exercising rabbinical authority, but we're watching some of the people you hang out with, some of the stuff you do. We don't think you are who you say you are. And they're having this debate going back and forth. So chapter 7 ends with them kind of calling a truce in debate. He goes home, goes to bed, gets up the next morning. Chapter 8 opens up. He starts teaching. And the religious leaders and the Pharisees says, no, we're going to win this one. We're going to prove that he's not who he says he is. And so then they drag this woman in front of the crowd, and boom, we've got this text in front of us. All right. Now, everybody say mindset. All right. Whenever you enter into a climate of debate, you first have to make sure you have the right mindset. And here's what I mean by the right mindset. Whether you're talking about abortion or immigration or class or race or homosexuality or same-sex relationships, whatever the hot button issue is, when you enter into that climate of debate, you have to go into that issue knowing, one, I'm ready to acknowledge that there's some folk hurting around this, other folk pain. And second, I'm aware of how sin affects me. In other words, my blind spots. Everybody say blind spots. Your mindset ought to reflect the position of your heart. Let's talk about the mindset that's in this text. First of all, they bring this woman who's caught in adultery, probably half clad, and they throw her in front of the crowd, which is the most horrific way to shame somebody, and it demonstrates that they're not concerned at all about her pain, so they are insensitive to her pain. Secondly, they say twice, we caught her in the act. Everybody say in the act. I mean, this is dramatic, y'all. In the act of adultery. Well, here's my question. If you caught her in the act of adultery, was she having adultery in the act by herself? Then how come just the woman is here? Where's the guy? And the law actually said, bring the woman and the man. So they have faulty judgment. It's bias. And then they have faulty motives. Did they bring this woman before Jesus because they were concerned about her? No. Did they bring this woman before Jesus because they were concerned about the families? Because whenever there's adultery, there's extended family that's also brought into that. So did they do this out of concern for the families? No. Did they bring this woman before Jesus out of concern for the community? Because that's what the law is actually about. It's about how to protect the community. Were they thinking about the community when they brought this woman before Jesus? No. Well, Pastor, how can you say you know what they were thinking? Because in verse 6, it tells me. It says that they were trying to trap Jesus into saying something they could use against him. Faulty motives. Then lastly, they took this woman, stripped her of her humanity, and turned her into a tool for their manipulation. Can somebody shout sinful? Sinful. Sinful. Here they are supposedly judging sin, and while they're doing it, they're committing sin in the worst degree, and they're not even aware of it because of their own blind spots. In 2004, the state of Massachusetts was the first state to legalize same-sex marriage. Prior to the state Supreme Court stepping in, there's a huge debate going on, rallies on different sides. As a spiritual leader in both the state and the city, I spoke to a group of about 2,000 folk, most of whom were in opposition of same-sex marriage. And by the way, my position hasn't changed today, although my heart is expanding. And so after I finished speaking, a speech on grace and truth, the next day I went down to the State House where hundreds of people were gathered on both sides of the issues, shouting and screaming and waving signs, etc. One sign caught my eye. It was a sign that read this: God hates fags. And when I read that sign, I became physically ill, extraordinarily angry. And, you know, I wanted to say then, and I'll just say it now, because that group is still around. I'll just say it now. Anybody who's waving that sign, suggesting that you're representing Christians and me, you're not representing me, you're not representing Jesus, you're not representing the church. Now, That sign is a reflection, or it reminds me, and it should remind us. And by the way, I know when we talk about the gay community, it's perhaps more appropriate to use the term LGBT community, but allow me to just say gay community in the most inclusive kind of way. Easier for me. So that sign reminds me of all of the hateful, violent, abusive things that some Christians, in the name of the church and the name of God, frequently perpetrate on the gay community. So let me just do this. Let me just be real here. I'm talking about our blind spots. So let me just say this. For those of you who are part of the gay community and you're here listening to me now, or your family and friends are part of the gay community, or you're listening by way of video, hear me when I say this. As a senior pastor of this church, representing Christians everywhere, including some of my colleagues who've said some hurtful things, I apologize to you for all of the ways that you were unnecessarily wounded, dehumanized, violated, disrespected, and made to feel like you're the worst group of people on the planet. I'm sorry. It was wrong. Please forgive us. We have to deal with our blind spots. How sin impacts us. So we see this illustrated in the text. Second thing that we see, if we think about our blind spots, is that this woman who was brought before Jesus was a part of the Jewish community. So she was a part of them. That's how they could apply the law to her. So just be clear about this. When we talk about our brothers and sisters and friends in the gay community, we're not talking about strangers. We're talking about our siblings, our children, our parents, our classmates, our colleagues. We're talking about our close friends who we're rooting for and cheering for and who we deeply love and who Jesus loved enough to die for and shed his blood for. So we're not talking about the proverbial them. We're always talking about us. We're talking about us. I had 3 conversations with gay men this past week who have adopted a scriptural lifestyle. So 2 are living inside of heterosexual marriages, and both of them would say they don't recommend that for everybody in the gay community, but it has worked for them through Jesus Christ. Another one is celibate, but all 3 of them said to me, listen, just keep in mind that when you give this message, sitting in your congregation will be people who have not been honest about their struggle with sexuality, but every day they make a choice to live according to the scriptural dictates, and they're sitting right there among you. So I just want to be very, very clear about this, right? If you are gay and struggling with your sexuality, but you're trying to live according to our understanding of the scriptural text, or if you're in a same-sex relationship right now and you're public and you're open about it, either group, if you come here, here's how we're going to treat you. We will respect you and we will cherish you, period, full stop, right there. That's the mindset. So when you enter, I've just modeled for you from my heart the mindset that you have to bring into an atmosphere of debate, a climate of debate. And you got to be aware and deal with appropriately your own blind spots. How sin impacts you inside of that discussion. And then you need to begin to take steps to move towards. Everybody shout, move towards. Move towards the person that you disagree with. And the first step that you take to move towards the person you disagree with is to be absolutely honest about your conviction with complete clarity that ought to, A, never condemn people, and B, never affirm sin. Or if you're not a Christian, that word, that word doesn't have a meaning for you, so wrong. A wrongdoer. All right? So be clear with those boundaries. So what does that mean? Well, if you look at the text, you'll find two words that are important. First one, shout teacher. That's in verse 4. That's when they come to Jesus. They say it kind of, the Pharisees, kind of tongue-in-cheek. But what John wants us to recognize is that, in fact, Jesus is the teacher about how to handle these kinds of issues. He's the teacher. Follow him. If he goes left, you go left. If he goes right, you go right. Follow Jesus. That's what it means to be a Jesus follower. Secondly, note the word trap. Everybody shout trap. That's in verse 6. They're trying to trap Jesus. And here's their thinking, right? They're saying, we got him now. The law, verse 5, the law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? Frame it this way, because here they are, they're setting traps to say, either A, he will enforce the law and condemn her, and this huge crowd of folk who thinks he's so loving and compassionate will disperse and say he was a phony all along. Or B, he will say, you know what, it's not really that big of a deal. And essentially affirm her lifestyle. And so they say, we got it. In some ways, that's where NBCC is now, right? Because we're standing in a world where some churches and culture come down on the right side of this issue, and they say, let's enforce the law. That anyone who lives outside of the parameters as we understand it, and listen, in that day of the text, when they stoned you, that's symbolic of removing you from the community. Listen, when they stone you, you're removed from the community. You're dead. And so there's some folk today who says, look, this is where we stand, and if you don't agree, get out. And then on the left, there's the other side that says, you know what, this is really not that big of a deal, right? And if you don't agree with us on that, get out. But today, we want to say NBCC is called to be the kind of congregation that says, we're going to be clear about where we stand on this issue, and if you disagree with us, stay in. Because we want to keep you in relationship and let God do what God wants to do. Now, Jesus is absolutely clear about where he's on this, absolutely clear about his conviction here. He doesn't stutter about his conviction here. He's clear. First of all, he's absolutely clear that adultery is a big deal. And part of the reason that he's clear that adultery is a big deal, one among several reasons, is because for Jesus, marriage is a big deal. Amen. And adultery undermines the Father's understanding of marriage. Now, there are those who will argue that when it comes to homosexuality, for example, that Jesus never says anything about homosexuality. They divide Jesus up from Paul. They say, Paul does all the writing, but Jesus, he doesn't say anything about homosexuality. And you're right, Jesus doesn't. But Jesus does have quite a bit to say about marriage and the definition of marriage. And Paul takes the implications of what Jesus says and he translates it into a Greco-Roman world where even Nero, the emperor of Rome, was married to a young man. And he's taken Jesus' understanding of marriage and he's translating the implications. That's what's going on. That's how they connect. What's Jesus' understanding of marriage? Well, in Matthew chapter 19, you'll find an amazing conversation, verses 4 and 5 there. And marriage is being debated. And there's a group of folk who are arguing that once you get married, that you ought to be able to get divorced for any Oh, reason. For any reason. Everybody say, for any reason. That's another message at another time. We need to talk about that. All right. And Jesus says, now here's Jesus' response to that. And in so he's going to talk about his understanding of marriage. And here's what Jesus says. Jesus says, have you not read the scriptures? Jesus says, the record is that from the beginning, God made them male and female. And then he goes on and quote another scripture. It says, and he says that this explains why a man should leave his mother and his father and join with his wife, and the two should become united as one. So now Jesus is clear. He says, so listen, from the very beginning, the Father intended for marriage to be a part of driving creation. He intended to be between a man and between a woman, for it to be lifelong, for it to be monogamous, and for it to be covenantal, and to be a place of equality before sin steps in. He makes it clear. But then the third thing that Jesus is clear about in terms of his conviction is he's also clear about the fact that, and this is what causes problems between him and the Pharisees and these other religious leaders, he's also clear about the fact that he loves a whole lot people who other folk hate. I mean, he really loves them. I mean, he's not just mouthing it. He loves folk who other people marginalize. He loves them. So let's prove it. This is a major issue for Jesus and the Pharisees. Let's prove it. If you go to Mark chapter 2, keep in mind, Matthew is one of the earlier disciples. Of course, one of the New Testament books is written after Matthew. And so in Mark chapter 2, you'll find that Matthew is a tax collector. Everybody say tax collector. Now, in the Jewish tradition, in the Jewish cultural context, literally the worst person on the planet was the person who worked for IRS. Well, kind of sorry. All right. Essentially, the worst person on the planet, which they would call scum, right? The worst person on the planet was a person who was a Jew himself, but was authorized by the Roman government to take money from his Jewish compadres and to pay the Roman government what they assessed and to keep the rest. And he could take as much money as he wanted, and more often than not, they drove their family and their community people into deep poverty while becoming rich themselves. They were despised. And yet Jesus starts to have a conversation with this tax collector, Matthew. And so later, the verse, put the verse up there. Later, that's what it means. Later, Levi, that's Matthew's Hebrew name, watch this, invites Jesus and his disciples. He hasn't yet decided to become a follower of Jesus yet, but he likes what he's hearing about Jesus. And so he invites Jesus and his disciples to be his dinner guests. Now watch this. This is where it gets fascinating. Then it says, watch this, along with many, everybody shout many tax collectors and notorious sinners. And then it put in parentheses, the text actually puts in parentheses, that there were many people of this kind among Jesus' followers. Now, what's the point? Here's the scene, right? When Jesus got to Matthew's house, Matthew probably had a big house. Man, when Jesus walked in, the liquor was pouring, the music was popping. Come on now. And I'm sure Jesus says, boy, it's happening up in here. And then he probably say, I don't know what all is happening up in here. Come on. But then he sits down and eats. He comes to dinner. And everybody in that house, not any of them was allowed in the synagogue. That's right. That's right. He sits down and eats. Now watch the text. The text says that when the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, same folk he's arguing with in John, saw him eating with these tax collectors and these sinners, they asked his disciples, how does he eat with such scum?
Then it says that when Jesus heard about it, he said to them, here's how I can eat. Because I didn't come looking for folk who think they righteous. I came looking for folk who know they sinners. All right. Now, so I believe that if Jesus was here in the flesh, he'd be clear about two things. One, you ask him, what's your definition of marriage? And he'll say, listen, what my Father intended from the very beginning of creation still remains the intent, which is that marriage is to be between a man and a woman, lifelong and monogamous. And any sexual relationships, heterosexual or homosexual, that falls outside of those boundaries, the actual Greek word behind sin is to miss the mark, miss the target, misses the mark of what God intends, and it breaks the Father's heart. I'm sure he would say that. Now, some of you sitting here say, well, I disagree. I don't agree with what you say. That's okay. And some of you would say, and if Jesus said that, I disagree with Jesus. And Jesus would say, that's okay. The second thing, I'm absolutely sure, if he was here in the flesh, is that if one of our same-sex couples who come here regularly said, invited him to come to dinner, Jesus would show up at the house. And hopefully they would invite some of their other friends. Come on, that notorious sinner category, that includes the rest of us, y'all. Just put yourself there, right? And hopefully they invite us all, right? And we come sit around the table, and Jesus is going to sit around the table. Now watch this. I don't think Jesus is going to bring the issue up. But the issue will come up. Because people, when they get around Jesus, they genuinely want to know. And I think when they ask Jesus, he's going to lay it out just the way I say it out. Here's the intent. Here's where our heart is on this. And then I think Jesus is going to say, but let me hasten to say that my love for you remains as it has always been. It's from everlasting to everlasting. Let me hasten to say that nothing in your body or around you can separate you from the love of the Father living in me. Nothing. I love you, period. I think he said that. This is what he does in the text, right? They say, come on, we're waiting on you to condemn. And then he flips it on it, right? He said, we'll talk about this. He said, all right, yeah, let's execute the law. And whoever doesn't have any sin in here, you be the one to throw the first stone. Now, I love this little piece. He said he keep writing on the ground, right? So here's my little, it doesn't say it, but this is just my imagination. Here's what I think he's writing. I think he's writing, Rabbi John, I saw you at Mary's house, and your wife is Rachel. Pharisee Jack, you were over at Johnny's house, but you're against same-sex relations. I think he was kind of writing that stuff out. Come on now. And the text says that they saw from the elderly. In other words, man, he knew what I did last night. I can't. He said, well, did anybody condemn you? And the woman said, no, sir. Watch Jesus. He's teaching us. He says, now, because he actually has no sin, so he could do it. He says, I don't condemn you. Watch him. He's still teaching. He says, go and sin no more. He doesn't say it's not a big deal. He says, oh no, it is a big deal. Go and sin no more. He doesn't affirm the behavior. All right. That's the Jesus that I follow. That's the Jesus that I love. That's the Jesus that loved you and me. I think that's exactly where he is. And so let me be absolutely clear, because we're trying to follow Jesus. He's a teacher. So let me be absolutely clear about where I am and where leadership are here about, what's our definition of marriage? It's between a man and a woman. It's meant to be lifelong, covenantal, monogamous, and reflect the equal nature before sin entered the process. That's the definition. Anything falls outside of that, straight or gay, misses the mark of God's intent. I think breaks God's heart. But I'm also absolutely clear that we will not condemn nobody who walks through this door, because if we did, we'd have to start with us. But I'm also absolutely clear, but neither will we affirm either a lifestyle or an attitude that is directly opposed to our understanding of God's call on our lives. You say, well, how does this look? This sounds nice. How does this look in practicality? Let me tell you. A number of years ago, my auntie raised her granddaughter in a little town. And the granddaughter grew up, got married, got divorced, and then ended up in a same-sex relationship. At some point or another, I called my auntie, and we were talking. This is how the older folk talk back in the South, in the country. She said, Hurmon? Yes, ma'am. She said, you know that my granddaughter, she used the name. She's moved into that girl. That's how they talk. I said, yes, ma'am. I said, yes, ma'am, I'd heard her. She said, and I told them, that is not right. That is not what God intends for them. I said, you did? She said, yes, sir, I sure did. She said, but let me tell you, I've been thinking about it, praying about it. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, but what I've decided to do, she said, I'm not changing my mind about, I know what they're doing is wrong. I told them. If they ask me again, I'm going to tell them again. But I'm going to love them. Right. Now, what did that look like in my auntie's life? What that looked like is anybody who showed up at auntie's house, she treated you like you the president of the United States. Man, you just come on in. She said, come on in here. And she told her granddaughter and her partner and the kids that they had, she said, come on in here. Come on in here. Grab a seat. Go on in there. I cook for you. I do peas and rice and neck bone. Go on in there. Go on in there. Make yourself at home. Go on in there. Come on back. Come on. Let's sit down and watch TV. And that was her context. But whenever the subject came up, she said, oh, you know, I know. She's, no, you all know you're all not right there. You know you're not right there. But she kept saying, but it's all right. You're welcome here. And when my aunt died, her granddaughter's partner stood up at the funeral and said that she had never experienced love the way she had experienced it from my auntie, who showed her what a real Christ follower looked like. All right, so be absolutely clear. So I'm going to step towards you. I know my mindset is I got to be aware of my blind spots and my own sinfulness and where I done messed up, right? I need to acknowledge that. And then I'm going to step towards you by being absolutely clear about where I am, what my conviction is. Now, let me say this. Some of you radically disagree with me, right? And for you, what I'm saying is wrong. And so your position is, I will not affirm wrong what you're saying. No worries. That's all right. But this works both ways. You see, I have to engage you, not condemn you, and neither affirm what I believe the Bible says is wrong. And it means that if you're going to be in relationship with me, you have to engage me, not affirm what you think is wrong, but you can't condemn me either. And we have that kind of attitude. I'm not going to condemn you and be clear about where my lines are, and you're not going to condemn me and be clear about where your lines are, and that we are determined to stay in relationship around Jesus Christ. Miracles could happen. Over time. Over time. All right. Next thing you have to do as I step towards the other person, the next thing you have to do is that you have to be able to listen to other people's stories. See, that woman that ended up in the dark, she didn't just wake up and end up in that fellow's bed. She had a story. And you got to be able to elicit other people's story. Say, okay, I got your position, but tell me your story that brought you to this position. And you got to be able to listen with compassion and thoughtfully. Tell me your story. Now, Jesus knew this woman's story, partly because he's fully human and fully God, so he knew the details of her story, but really her story wasn't much different than most women in her time. So when you were a woman born in the Jewish community at that time, when you were born, you came on the scene as the property of your father. And if you managed not to get raped or damaged in some way like that, then perhaps you'd become married, which means you'd become the property of your husband. And so probably the story of this woman is that she was in a relationship where her husband just simply treated her as property. And she ran into somebody who she would say, for the first time in her life, treated her with real love. See, she had a story. Everybody practice this. Tell me your story. Say it. I want to hear your story. And when I finished speaking and all that, a couple weeks later, because I was the president of an organization called GBIO, which was made up of all these different organizations, Christians, Jewish, Muslims, liberal, conservative, etc. And thousands of people. And so I got a letter through the office. The letter said, we heard what Pastor Hurmon said the other night. Would he and Pastor Ray Hammond, who was my colleague, who also took the same position, would they be willing to come to dinner with us, two same-sex couples, and hear our story? So Sherry, my executive director, said to me, she said, I hate to read this to you, but I have to read this to you. And so she read it to me, and then she says, well, what are you going to do? And I'm thinking, you know, Jesus went to dinner with Matthew. I'm going to dinner. And she said, are you nuts? I said, no. She said, are you crazy? I said, what are you talking about? She said, this thing is going to blow up and tear up our organization. She said, are you going to go change your mind? I said, no. She said, are they going to change their mind? I said, probably not. She said, well, what good is it to go? It's just going to blow up. She's worried about the organization. I said, Sherry, listen. I said, right now, there's a big stone wall up. And folk on my side and folk on their side, we're screaming at each other through this stone wall. Amen. I said, if I go and have dinner with them, it will not tear down the wall, but it might help that wall to be transformed from being stone to being glass. Because if you can see the person you're yelling about, and if you can see the person that you're shouting about, you're less likely to yell and more likely to respect. So I went to dinner. Two same-sex couples, and they could cook. They had their rabbi there, and me and Pastor Ray Hammond, we were there, and they shared with me their stories. Now listen, everybody has different stories. I talked to a gay man the other day who told me that his story was that he was molested at an early age, and that his pastor told him it was okay, and he went 35, 40 years engaged in same-sex relationships, and then he had an encounter with Christ, and then he had a discovery what God's word said about it, and it took him about 5 years to make the transition with the support of a loving Christian community that said, we're going to love you no matter what, and now he's one of the guys who's living in a heterosexual marriage. He says, I'm not recommending this for everybody, but God has blessed me in it. That's his story. But there's my friend David Olson, who's a minister in the University Unitarian Church. His story is much like the couples that I talked to. He said, look, I just woke up one day at 6 years old and realized I had same-sex attraction. And I was in a Pentecostal church, and I knew they wouldn't support it. I hid it for most of my life. And when I got into college, I prayed, Lord, all night that he would take it from me, and he didn't. So I just concluded, since he didn't take it from me, it must be okay. And David said to me, so what do you think? And I said, before I tell you what I think, let me tell you what I feel. I took about 15, 20 minutes sharing how can you not be compassionate when you hear a story like that? How can you not be compassionate when you hear about people's suffering and they feel trapped in their suffering if they don't fall on the steps? Compassion. We're friends today because I was able to, I said, let me tell you what I feel. And then when he said, okay, now tell me what you think. I said, let me tell you what I think. And I said, here's what I think. I said, when you were telling me about your story and how you were crying for help, I said, I had a vision of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. And I could hear him say, Father, all things are possible to you. Take this cup of suffering away from me. And he prayed all night. And the Father's answer was no. And finally, Jesus concluded that my choosing towards suffering is part of how God is going to move his plan of redemption and transformation into the world through all ages. And so Jesus chose towards suffering. So sometimes all of us will face a decision where our discipleship, our commitment, now if you're not committed to Jesus, then this is a whole other story for you. But if you're committed to Jesus, it will call us to choose towards suffering, not away. All right? Well, you may disagree with that. And in this church, you have space to do so. Lastly, as we conclude, so as I walk towards you, clear about my conviction, not condemning, not condoning, walk towards you, I want to hear your story, and I want to share my story thoughtfully, compassionately. Walk towards you, I want to engage you with humility and respect for boundaries. Well, his humility is in the text is here. Jesus says, let him who is without sin throw the first stone. And in my mind, I see these, in the Baptist church, when people want to leave church before the preacher finishes, they do this. As though their finger made them invisible. And so the text says, oh man, he just read my mail. And the oldest ones are the ones who realize it first, the more mature. And so they exit. And finally, everybody's exited except for. And so when Jesus asked that, what he did was he injected humility into the scene. And so humility enabled them to see the blind spots that they hadn't seen before. Whenever I talk about this issue, I always say this is where we are based on our understanding of Scripture and our understanding of Jesus. And there's humility in that place. It says that, God may show me something else, but if he does, it's going to come through the Word, not from culture.
Amen. Yes.
Because the Word is the revelation for us. All right? And then there's boundaries. He says, go. I'm not going to condemn you. But the moment he said, sin no more, he drew a boundary. And let me just say this point about this whole suffering piece. We don't know what that woman did. But if she did what Jesus asked her to do, she probably took steps towards suffering. Because by now she's been branded publicly. She's bad goods. Nobody's going to want to marry her within 10, 15, 20 miles. And it's probable, that the only person that'd be willing to be in a relationship with her, come on now, is a person that she loves. And either she goes back to him or she does what Jesus says and enters into suffering, but that suffering bends towards redemption. I think I'm speaking probably to somebody here. Let's just forget the gay community just for a moment. Let's just talk about the heterosexual community. Y'all know there's enough stuff among the heterosexual stuff here. Y'all know that's where the real stuff is. Somebody say amen. Amen. I got some folk in here right now. You're in adulterous relationships and you've justified it. You said, look, this is the only person who understands me, the only person who loves me the way that I am. And you need to hear Jesus say, you don't come, go and sin no more. For you, that might be a step towards suffering. So, then there's respect for boundaries. So he drew a boundary when he said, don't do it. Here's how my auntie did it. So come on in here, bring those kids. Come on, let's sit down and eat. Let's play games. Oh, it's late. All right, it's late. I can almost hear her say this. It's late. All right. Well, what are y'all going to do? You want to spend the night? You can spend the night. But you can't sleep in the same bed. That's That's a boundary, right? I'm going to love you, I'm going to invade you, I'm going to engage you, but I can't let you sleep in the same bed because I lose my integrity in this respect. So y'all can sleep here, just sleep in separate beds. And you know what? Her granddaughter had enough respect for her grandmother to say, no, I won't put you in that position. We'll go to a hotel. And the grandmama said, all right, I'll see y'all for breakfast. So here, as we talk about this, listen. I don't care where you are in your sexual whatever, heterosexual or homosexual, you're welcome in this place. And you're welcome to come to worship, and you're welcome to serve in our, be in our life groups, and you're welcome to get with us in serving and all of that. But you know what? In order for us to have integrity, we too have to have some boundaries. So, I can't marry a same-sex couple. That's a boundary. So, folk who are, hold your applause, folk who are participating in sexual relationships, straight or gay, that doesn't fit what Jesus has said, you know, along with a whole list of other attitudes, we can't have you exercising spiritual leadership. But apart from that, and a few other practicalities, and you ought to go to our website. I've written about this. It's on our website now. But apart from that, we want you to come on in here, and we're gonna love on one another. Right. Now, I know that I've just crossed somebody's boundaries. Because for somebody, you're saying, if you can't fully endorse everything that I do, I feel like, even though you're saying you don't condemn me, I feel like you're condemning me. And because of that, I can't come here. And if that's your position, let me just tell you, that breaks my heart. Because I so desperately want you to come here. But I will respect your boundaries. That's what it's about. Lastly, and I'm finished here. Thank you for your patience. You know, the last point is be honest about who you are and be hopeful about who you're becoming. And one of my favorite passages is in Luke 24 and 14. You know, Jesus tells this story, and the master in the story represents Jesus. And the master sends his servant out, and he says, go tell all the folk who's supposed to be here, I'm throwing a party, get them here. All the so-called righteous folk. And few folk showed up. So the text is on the screen there. He says, and then the master says to the servant, all right, go into the country lanes. Watch this. And behind the hedges, that means people who are hiding, and urge them, whoever you find, to come that my house might be full. Yes. All right? That means everybody. Everybody. Now listen, I know that we think in secular culture, the greatest symbol of intimacy is the bedroom. But not in the church. The greatest symbol in the church for intimacy is the communion table. You know, this is at this table where Jesus says, this is my body broken for you. And it's at this table where Jesus says, this is my blood poured out for the forgiveness of your sins. You know, this is a messy table. It's got broken bodies, it's got blood all over the place. It's got murder built into this whole thing. It's messy. And you know, a lot of my colleagues, they said to me, don't touch this. It's messy. They said, we wouldn't preach about this in our congregation. You ought to think twice before you, it's messy. But listen, here's the reality for me. I know it's messy, but I'm so excited about the gospel of Jesus Christ that I'm determined to run towards the messiness. And we won't get it all right all of the time, but we're going to do our best to be faithful in the messiness. You know my definition for Christmas is Christ in the mess with us. That's communion. No. A few months later after that encounter, I ran across a same-sex couple in one of our big GBL meetings. I went over and talked to both of them, hugged them, loved on them, picked up the kids, spent time with them, asked how they were doing. And went on about my way to give the speech I had to give. 2 weeks later, someone who was there said to me, said, Reverend Hamilton, when you left and they named her, she started crying. I said, was something I said, something I did? So I said, oh no. What she said to me was, Reverend Hamilton has made it absolutely clear that he does not agree with our lifestyle. But did you see how he loved on us? She said, wow. And she started crying. They will know us in BCC by our love. First Corinthians 13:7 puts it like this. Love never stops. Shout, never stops.
Never stop.
Never stops being patient. Love never stops. Shout, never stops. Never stops believing. Love never stops. Shout, never stops. Never stops hoping. Love never quits. That's what my auntie showed her granddaughter, that love never stops. That's what we want to show everybody who walks through this door. And when we say that love never stops being patient, we mean that we extend grace to everybody. When we say that love never stops believing, that means that we will express faith that God can do something great in your life no matter who you are. When we say that love never stops hoping, that means that we will express an attitude of expecting the best from you no matter what. And when we say love never quits, it means that our commitment is, if you are here, whether we agree with you or not, we will hang in there in the worst of times. That's what it means here for us to love everybody. Give God a hand praise. Amen. 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 Show me your card. Show me your card. Show me your card. Here's my challenge to you. As a sermon response, I want to challenge you to write, go deeper. And what that means is, you don't have to talk about homosexuality. There's a number of hot button issues out there that I want to challenge you to think about over the course of the next week or two, finding somebody that disagrees with you, but perhaps share the same faith with you, or maybe they don't. And they're in your family. There's somebody that matters to you. And use these steps and have a loving, courageous conversation that begins with the right mindset and ends with the right heart, as I've expressed here today. God bless you.